Ayana had always loved the wide-open plains of her homeland. She loved the tall grass that moved like waves in the wind and the warm sun that touched her skin like a gentle hand. But on this day, everything felt different. She had become separated from her group while gathering herbs near the edge of the prairie. One moment she was following a trail of small white flowers. And the next, she realized she could no longer hear the familiar voices of her people. The silence around her grew heavy, and a soft worry began to settle in her chest. She walked for a long time, trying to find her way back, but the land stretched endlessly in every direction. The sky was turning a deeper gold as the sun slowly made its way toward the horizon. She knew she needed to find shelter soon. Her feet were tired, her throat was dry, and the world felt larger than she had ever imagined. Not far from where she wandered, a cowboy named Luke Harlow rode across the prairie on his brown horse, Dusty. Luke was a quiet man, known for his calm manners and thoughtful ways. People said he was a man who listened more than he spoke and who tried to do what was right even when no one was watching. Luke enjoyed riding alone because the open plains gave him time to think and breathe. It was the only place where he felt completely at peace. As Luke guided his horse along a shallow ravine, he noticed something unusual, a small shape moving near the bottom of the slope. At first he thought it might be a stray animal, but as he rode closer, he realized it was a young girl. She was sitting on the ground, hugging her knees, her head lowered. She looked lost, tired, and frightened. Luke stopped his horse a short distance away. He didn't want to startle her. "Hello there," he said softly, keeping his voice gentle. "Are you all right?" The girl looked up quickly. Her dark eyes were wide with fear and confusion. She did not speak. She did not even stand. She simply stared at him, unsure of what his presence meant. Luke slowly stepped down from his horse and kept his hands visible so she could see he meant no harm. He took a few careful steps toward her, but stayed far enough away to give her space. "I'm not here to trouble you," he said. "You look lost. Do you need help?" Ayana understood some English words, but not enough to answer fully. Shook her head lightly, then looked around the empty plains, as if hoping her people might appear at any moment. When they did not, her shoulders trembled with worry. Luke noticed the slight shaking, could see she was tired and perhaps injured. Her clothes were dusty from walking, and her hair looked windblown, as if she'd been wandering for hours. "You've been out here alone for a while, haven't you?" he asked softly. Ayana looked at him again, this time with a little less fear, though still not trusting. She was trying to understand who he was and why he was speaking kindly to her. Luke had seen fear before on the faces of lost travelers, young ranch hands during storms, and animals during harsh seasons. But this fear was different. It came from someone who did not know what the world expected of her now that she was alone. Luke slowly reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a water canteen. He placed it on the ground halfway between them. "You don't have to come close," he said. "But if you're thirsty, this is for you." Ayana hesitated. Her eyes moved from Luke to the canteen, then back to Luke again. She waited a few long breaths, then carefully crawled forward just enough to reach the canteen. She held it tightly, as if it might disappear if she didn't. After a moment of studying it, she opened it and took a careful sip. The cool water soothed her dry throat. Luke smiled gently. "Good. You needed that." Still unsure what to do next, Ayana sat quietly holding the canteen. Her heart slowed a little. She sensed that the cowboy was not there to harm her. He was calm, patient, and respectful. His eyes did not carry unkind intentions. Luke looked toward the horizon. The sun was sinking lower, painting the sky in soft orange, pink, and gold. Night would come soon, and he knew the girl could not stay alone and unprotected on the open plains. "It's getting late," he said softly, glancing back at her. "You can stay near my camp tonight. I won't come close unless you ask. I just don't want you to be alone out here." Ayana understood only part of his words, but she understood the tone. Gentle, steady, not demanding. She hugged her knees tighter, thinking. She didn't want to trust a stranger, especially someone from a world she had been taught to fear. But she also didn't want to spend the night alone in the darkness, where the cold could creep in and wild animals might come searching. Luke didn't push her. He returned to his horse and set up a small camp nearby, still giving her plenty of distance. He He built a tiny fire, not large or bright, just enough to give warmth and light. He placed a blanket several steps away from his own bedroll so she could use it if she wished. Then he sat quietly beside his fire, not looking directly at her. Allowing her to decide for herself, Ayanna watched him from where she sat. She saw how he moved slowly, calmly, not in a way that tried to scare or control her. She saw the way. He placed the blanket for her, even though she had not asked. She listened to the quiet sounds of the fire and the soft rustling of the grass. Little by little, the fear inside her softened, replaced by cautious curiosity. After several long moments, she stood up. Her legs trembled a little, but she gathered her strength and walked slowly toward the blanket. She kept her eyes on Luke, ready to run if he made any sudden move. But he didn't. He simply nodded, as if to say, "It's all right." She sat down on the blanket, still holding the canteen. It was the closest she dared to be. Luke spoke quietly. "You're safe here." They didn't talk much. Ayanna didn't know how, and Luke didn't want to overwhelm her. Instead, they sat in the quiet evening as the last colors of sunlight faded away and the stars began to appear above them. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called out. The air grew cooler, but the fire's warm glow kept the cold away. As she sat beside the small flame, Ayanna felt a tiny sense of comfort. Not trust, not yet, but comfort. She didn't know who this man truly was, but she could tell he was someone who tried to be good, someone who cared enough to help a lost girl without expecting anything in return. Luke watched the stars for a long time before speaking again, his voice almost a whisper. "Tomorrow we'll find your people." Ayanna didn't reply, but she looked at him, really looked, with eyes that were beginning to see him not as a threat, but as a strange, unexpected protector. The night passed quietly, and though both came from different worlds, something gentle began forming between them, something small, fragile, and important. A connection that neither of them planned, but one that would change both their lives in ways they could not yet imagine. The morning light touched the land softly, turning the sky pale gold. Ayanna opened her eyes slowly. For a moment she did not remember where she was. The sound of a crackling fire, a quiet breeze, and the smell of warm air surrounded her. Then she saw the cowboy sitting a short distance away, cleaning his coffee tin and humming a soft tune. The memories of the night returned her, getting lost, the fear, the tiredness, and then the calm. Respectful stranger who let her sleep near his fire, Luke noticed she was awake. He didn't turn right away. He didn't want her to feel watched or pressured. He simply spoke in a calm, morning voice. "Good morning. There's warm water here if you want some." Ayanna sat up slowly, brushing dust from her dress. She still felt unsure, still afraid of making the wrong move, but she also felt a little safer than the day before. She looked at the small cup he had set near her blanket. It wasn't too close, just close enough for her to reach without stepping into his space. She crawled forward and picked up the cup. The steam rose gently from the water. She took a sip and felt her body warm from the inside. Luke smiled softly, but he did not move closer. "You must be hungry," he said. Ayanna wasn't sure how to reply, but her stomach answered for her with a soft growl. Luke chuckled quietly, not to mock her, but because the sound was simple, human, and honest. He reached into his saddlebag and placed a small cloth on the ground. Inside it were a few pieces of dried fruit and bread. Again, placed it far enough that she could take it without fear. Ayanna hesitated. Back home, she had been taught not to accept food from strangers easily, but she also knew she needed strength to keep moving. After watching him for another moment, she slowly reached out and took a small piece of fruit. It tasted sweet and soft, like the fruit she used to eat with her mother near the river. She took another bite, then another, trying not to show how hungry she truly was. Luke pretended not to notice her eagerness. He wanted her to feel dignity, not embarrassment. He ate quietly, giving her time and space. When they finished eating, Luke stood and brushed the dust from his clothes. "We should start moving," he said. "Your people will be searching for you." Ayanna nodded, even though she did not fully understand his words. She understood the direction of his hand when he pointed north. That way led to her home, but she couldn't get there alone. She stood up slowly. Her legs felt stiff, but she was strong enough to walk. Luke walked toward his horse, Dusty, and tightened the saddle straps. Then he turned toward her again. "You can walk beside me," he said softly. "I won't ride unless you want me to." Ayanna wasn't sure if she trusted horses enough to climb on one that morning, so she shook her head lightly. Luke nodded as if he expected that answer, so they started walking, side by side but with a careful distance between them. At first they didn't talk. The wind carried the sound of grass brushing against their feet. The sky was big and open, and the fields around them stretched farther than the eye could see. Ayanna's dress swayed with her steps. Luke kept his pace slow so she wouldn't grow tired too quickly. After a long silence, Luke spoke softly. "I'm Luke." Ayanna looked up at him. She didn't speak right away. She repeated the sound in her mind. Luke. It was a simple name, but unfamiliar to her. She finally said her own name carefully. "Ayanna." Luke smiled warmly. "Ayanna," he repeated, trying to say it the way she did. She nodded, surprised. He said it correctly. Something inside her brightened, a small spark of recognition, being seen as herself, not just a frightened girl in the grass. They continued walking. The sun rose higher, warming the land. Luke offered her water from his canteen every now and then, and each time she took it with a little less hesitation. As they walked, Luke kept checking the horizon. "There should be a river nearby," he said quietly, mostly to himself. "If we find it, we might find signs of your people." Ayanna didn't understand all his words, but she knew the word people. It made her heart ache softly. She missed her mother's voice, her father's steady presence, her brothers, and the familiar laughter of the younger children. She wondered if they were searching for her. She wondered if they thought she was hurt. Her eyes grew wet, and she quickly wiped them with the back of her hand, hoping he didn't notice. But Luke did notice. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask questions. Instead, he slowed his steps even more and gave her time to breathe, to calm her heart, to steady her emotions. The land changed as they walked. The grass became taller, the soil darker and softer. A few trees appeared in the distance. Luke pointed toward them. "Shade," he said. "Rest." Ayanna nodded. They walked toward the trees and sat under the biggest one. Its branches spread wide overhead, casting cool shadows on the ground. Ayanna felt grateful for the shade. Her forehead was warm, and her feet were getting sore from walking so long. Luke took out a small cloth and dipped it in his water. "Can I help?" he asked gently, showing her the cloth but not touching her. Ayanna hesitated. She remembered the moment the day before when he tried to check her injuries. She had felt scared, then more scared than she could explain. But now she saw his careful eyes, his gentle hands, and his slow, respectful movements. She nodded slowly. Luke smiled and handed her the cloth instead of placing it on her directly. "You can use it," he said. Ayanna pressed the cool cloth against her face and neck. It felt refreshing. She let out a soft breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Luke looked relieved, as if helping her even a little gave him comfort. They rested under the tree for a while, listening to birds sing softly from the branches. Dusty grazed on the grass nearby, quietly chewing and flicking his tail. The moment felt peaceful, so peaceful that Ayanna almost forgot she was far from home. After some time, Luke spoke again. "If you ever feel tired or if you want to stop, just tell me," he said. He pointed to his chest. Me then pointed to her. "You tell." Ayanna watched his hands and slowly understood the gesture. She touched her own chest lightly and nodded, showing she understood. They continued their journey. Luke walked a little ahead sometimes, checking the ground for tracks or signs. Ayanna watched him closely. He seemed to know the land well, how the wind moved, how the grass bent, how to listen to the earth. His calm confidence gave her courage. At one point, he stopped and crouched down. "Look," he said, pointing at the ground. AI stepped closer. She saw a faint mark in the dirt like a curved line from a shoe. Someone had passed that way not long ago. Maybe your people, Luke said. Her heart beat faster with hope. She looked at the tracks again and again, wanting to believe they belonged to her family. But she also knew the world was wide. Many people moved through the land. Even so, hope was enough. It made her steps lighter. As the day continued, clouds moved slowly across the sky, making shifting shadows on the ground. Ayanna began to trust that Luke meant only good. He never raised his voice, never made sudden moves, never spoke in a way that felt demanding. Everything he did was thoughtful. At one point she stumbled on a rock and nearly fell. Luke reached out quickly, but then stopped himself halfway when he saw her flinch. Instead of touching her arm, he moved his hand away and simply said, "Careful." She steadied herself and gave a small nod. Grateful, he respected her boundaries. By late afternoon, they reached a small stream. The water was clear and cool, dancing over smooth stones. Ayanna knelt beside it and cupped water into her hands. She splashed some on her face and laughed softly at the refreshing cold. It was the first time Luke heard her laugh. It was quiet, simple, and gentle, but it filled the air like a warm breeze. Luke smiled without even thinking. As they followed the stream, the land slowly began to feel more familiar to Ayanna. She recognized shapes of distant hills, certain trees, and the way the stream curved through the earth. Her heart lifted. She turned to Luke and pointed ahead. He understood. "You know this place?" he asked. She nodded quickly. Luke felt relief wash over him. They were getting closer, but with every step they took toward her home, something else also grew inside him, a quiet worry. He knew that once she reached her family, she would no longer need him. And though he wanted nothing more than for her to be safe, a small part of him wondered if she would remember him after she returned to her world and he returned to his. As the sun began to lower again, painting the sky in soft evening colors, they continued walking, but the air around them felt different now. There was hope, yes, but also uncertainty, a quiet bond forming between two people from different worlds, connected only by kindness, trust, and the long path ahead. The next morning arrived softly, with a pale light that seemed to float across the land like a gentle blanket. Ayanna opened her eyes to find the cowboy already awake, sitting by the dying fire and rubbing Dusty's neck in slow circles. He looked calm, but his face carried something deeper, quiet weight that she didn't fully understand yet. Ayanna sat up and pulled the blanket around her shoulders. A cool breeze drifted through the trees. She watched Luke for a long moment. There was something different about him today. His shoulders seemed a little lower, his movements a little slower, as if he had spent the whole night thinking about something heavy. Luke noticed her watching and offered her a small smile. "Morning," he said in his gentle voice. "I hope you slept well." Ayanna nodded. She didn't speak much, but she understood kindness when she saw it. She understood worry too, and Luke was filled with it. He handed her the canteen and let her take a long drink. "We'll keep following the stream today," he said. "It should lead us closer to your home." Ayanna nodded again. She could feel hope rising inside her, but she also felt a strange ache, like there was something she didn't want to leave behind. She didn't know what to call that feeling yet. After they ate a small breakfast, they packed up camp. Luke placed the blanket on his horse, and Ayanna watched him carefully. She saw how thoughtful he was with every movement, as if he wanted everything around him to feel safe. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, and they began walking. For a long time, they walked in silence, following the slow curve of the stream. The sunlight sparkled on the water, creating tiny bright circles that danced in the current. Birds fluttered from branch to branch, and the sound of their wings brushed softly against the quiet morning air. But there was still something different about Luke. He kept looking away quickly whenever Ayanna glanced in his direction. His eyes were distant, thoughtful, almost troubled. Finally, Ayanna slowed her steps. She tugged lightly on her sleeve and made a small sound to get his attention. Luke looked back, surprised. "Oh, sorry, Ziana. I didn't mean to walk ahead." She shook her head. That wasn't why she had stopped. She stepped closer, studying his face. His eyes were gentle as always, but they were also filled with something like sadness. "Are you okay?" she asked in her soft voice, using one of the English words she knew well. Luke's steps halted. He looked at her as if he didn't expect her to ask. For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. Then he took a slow breath. "I'm all right," he said softly. "Just thinking." Ayanna stared at him with her calm, dark eyes. She waited. Luke could tell she wanted the truth, not the easy answer he had given. He looked down at the ground, at the stream gently touching the stones. "I keep thinking about yesterday," he said in a quiet voice. "When you were scared, when I tried to help you and you didn't want me to. I didn't mean to make you afraid." He paused and rubbed the back of his neck, unsure how to explain the feeling inside him. "I keep thinking, maybe I should have done something differently. I didn't want you to feel unsafe. Not ever." Ayanna listened closely. She didn't fully understand every word, but she understood his tone. She understood regret, and she understood that he cared deeply, not just a little, but in a way that touched his whole heart. She took a small step closer, something she wouldn't have dared to do the first day. She pointed to her chest and said, "Ayanna, safe." Luke breathed out slowly, almost like a sigh of relief. "Thank you," he whispered. "That means a lot." Still, she could tell he wasn't completely at peace. He kept replaying the moment in his mind, carrying the weight of it like a stone in his pocket. He wasn't a man who easily ignored his own feelings. He held on to things, worries, responsibilities, promises, and they shaped the way he moved through the world. They walked again, but more slowly this time. The stream beside them hummed gently, filling the quiet spaces between their steps. After a while, Luke began to talk, not loudly, but in a way that made his words spill out like water from a full cup. "I never wanted to cause harm," he said. "Not to you, not to anyone." He paused, trying to find simple words. "Sometimes, even when we try to do the right thing, we end up making someone scared, and that hurts more than anything." Ayanna listened carefully. She wished she knew more English so she could tell him that she understood, that she didn't blame him. That fear came easily when one was alone in the world, and he had never truly caused her pain. Instead, she reached out her hand, a small, hesitant gesture. She didn't touch him, but she held her hand near his arm for a brief moment, just long enough for him to understand. It was her way of saying, "You are good. You helped me." Luke felt something warm spread through his chest. That tiny gesture meant more to him than 1,000 words. They continued walking, and little by little, the guilt on his face began to fade. Ayanna noticed the way his shoulders lifted, the way his steps grew steadier. The weight he carried was becoming lighter. As they followed the stream, the scenery changed again. The land grew softer and greener. Small flowers bloomed near the edges of the water, and the air smelled sweet like spring grass. Ayanna paused to touch one of the flowers. It was white with a golden center, delicate and lovely. Luke watched her gently run her fingers along the petals. "You like flowers?" he asked. She nodded. "My mother," she said, placing her hand over her heart. "She likes—" Luke's eyes softened. "Then maybe this place is close to home." Her heart fluttered with hope. They came upon a tall hill. Luke shaded his eyes and looked into the distance. "Let's climb," he said softly. "From the top, we might see something." Ayanna agreed. They made their way up the gentle slope. The hill wasn't steep, but it was high enough to give a clear view of the land. As they reached the top, Ayanna's breath caught in her throat. The world stretched far below them, green and golden. Trees lined the river. Smoke rose faintly from a distant camp far to the northeast. Ayanna's heart jumped. She pointed toward the rising smoke, her hand trembling. "Home," she whispered. Luke looked at the smoke, then at her. He felt relief wash through him like warm sunlight. "We're close," he whispered. But something else flickered through him too, something quieter, almost like sadness. He realized her journey with him would soon end. She would return to her people, and he would return to his ranching life. Still, he pushed his feelings aside and smiled at her. "Come on, we'll get you there." They went down the hill together. The closer they walked toward the distant smoke, the more memories filled Ayana's eyes. She saw familiar patterns in the land, familiar shapes in the trees. Her steps became faster, filled with hope. Luke watched her quietly. He could feel her excitement, and it made him happy. But inside him, a quiet ache grew stronger. He had grown used to her presence, the small sounds she made when she walked, the way she studied everything with calm curiosity, the soft trust that had slowly grown between them. Losing that, even for the right reason, felt heavier than he wanted to admit as they walked. Dusty followed behind them at an easy pace, as if even the horse understood the quiet emotions in the air. Ayana glanced back at Luke and saw the softness in his eyes. Something inside her chest tightened gently. She didn't want to lose him either, not completely. She didn't know how long they had walked together, but she knew it had changed her. She was no longer the frightened girl who sat alone in the ravine. She had grown stronger, braver, and some of that came from him. She touched her chest, then pointed lightly toward him. "Good," she said softly. Luke's smile was small, but full of meaning. "Thank you," he whispered. They continued walking together, side by side, as the sky slowly shifted from morning gold to soft afternoon light. The land ahead carried the promise of home, but the space between them carried something else, a deep, quiet bond, shaped by trust, kindness, and the long journey they shared. And though the path ahead was uncertain, neither of them walked with fear anymore. They walked with hope, and with the gentle understanding that some people come into our lives not by chance, but by something quiet and meaningful that guides us when we need it most. The land ahead felt different now. Ayana walked faster than before, her steps lighter, her eyes bright with hope. She could almost feel her family close by, like the warm memory of a hand on her shoulder. Luke followed beside her, matching her pace but staying careful not to rush her. His heart felt warm because she was finally close to home, yet it also felt heavier than he expected as they walked. The distant smoke rose slowly into the sky. It twisted like a soft ribbon in the air. Ayana kept looking at it again and again, as if afraid it might disappear. Each time she looked, she whispered something in her own language that Luke didn't understand. But he knew what the words meant. They meant hope, love, and longing. "Not far now," Luke said gently. Ayana nodded. She was quiet, but her eyes spoke louder than words. They carried excitement and worry at the same time. She didn't know what she would find when she arrived. She didn't know how long she had been gone. She didn't know if her family had stayed in the same place or moved to another area to search for her. But she believed deep in her heart that home was near. As they followed the path along the stream, the land became more alive. They saw footprints in the soft earth, small piles of stones that marked familiar paths. A few colorful threads caught on bushes, threads from clothing made by her people. Each sign made Ayana's breath catch with happiness. Luke also noticed these signs. He felt relief, but he also felt a quiet fear inside him. He wasn't scared of Ayana's people. He understood they would be protective, maybe confused, maybe cautious. But he worried about how they would see him, a stranger walking beside a girl from their tribe. He didn't want them to misunderstand. He didn't want anyone to think he had done anything wrong. He looked at Ayana, walking ahead with hope shining in her eyes, and he knew he would explain everything if he had to. He would speak from the heart. He would tell them how he found her alone, how he helped her, how he did his best to keep her safe. He hoped that would be enough. Ayana suddenly stopped. Luke froze too, worried something was wrong. But Ayana wasn't frightened. She was listening. A soft sound floated through the air. It was faint, like the low hum of a song carried by the wind. Ayana stood still, her eyes wide, her hands pressed against her heart. "What is it?" Luke whispered. She pointed ahead. "Voices," she said softly. Luke listened harder. After a moment, he heard it too, a gentle echo of talking, laughter, and the sound of a pot being moved over a fire. Home sounds. Ayana turned to him with tears filling her eyes. "Family," she whispered. Luke nodded and gave her a warm smile. "Let's go slow," he said softly. "We don't want to surprise anyone." They walked forward, one careful step at a time. The path began to open, and they could see colorful tents in the distance arranged in a half circle. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children ran between the tents, their laughter drifting through the air. Women were grinding herbs, and men were tending to horses. Ayana's eyes filled with joy. Her feet wanted to run. She took a step forward, but before she could go any farther, soft sound broke the calm. Huff. Forford. So Luke turned his head and saw a group approaching, not at a fast pace. Not in anger, but with purpose. The group was made of several Comanche riders, dressed in traditional clothing, decorated with beads and feathers. They looked strong, alert, and protective. Ayana froze. Luke felt his chest tighten. He knew they would misunderstand if they thought he had taken her. The riders slowed as they reached the edge of the clearing. Their horses snorted softly in the cool air. They looked from Ayana to Luke, their expressions unreadable but serious. Ayana stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "I am here," she said softly in English, then repeated it in her language. One of the riders, a tall man with gentle eyes, immediately slid off his horse. He stared at Ayana as if he couldn't believe she was real. His lips parted and his eyes filled with tears. "Ayana," he whispered. Ayana gasped. She knew that voice anywhere. It was her father. She took one step forward, then another, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her father closed the distance in a few long steps and kneeled before her, touching her face with trembling hands. She leaned into his touch, feeling the comfort she had longed for. Luke watched quietly, his heart warm with relief. This moment belonged to them, father and daughter reunited under the quiet sky. But the other riders kept their eyes on Luke. They were not unkind. They saw a stranger standing beside their child, and they wanted to understand. Ayana turned quickly, wiping her tears. She pointed at Luke and touched her heart. He could see she was trying to speak for him. She walked closer to Luke and looked up at him. Her eyes spoke clearly. "Let me help you the way you helped me." She took a deep breath, stepped forward, and addressed her father and the other riders in her own language. Her voice was gentle but strong. She told them how Luke had found her alone, how he had given her water, warmth, food, and safety, how he always stayed respectful, always gave her space, always protected her from fear and cold, how he helped her find her way home. She even told them how he worried when she cried, how he carried guilt he didn't deserve, and how he walked every step beside her. Her words were full of truth, spoken from the deepest part of her heart. The riders listened. Their expressions softened slowly. Luke didn't understand her language, but he could feel the change in the air. The tension around him faded little by little, placed by understanding. Ayana's father stepped toward Luke. He looked into the cowboy's eyes, not with suspicion, but with gratitude. He placed his hand over his chest in a sign of respect and nodded deeply. Luke returned the gesture, placing his hand lightly to his chest as well. He didn't need words. The gesture was enough. Ayana's father spoke a few soft words in English. "Thank you for bringing her home." Luke swallowed hard. "You're welcome," he said quietly. "She's a brave girl." "She helped me too." Ayana smiled gently. It was true. Their journey had changed them both. Her father motioned for her to come closer. Ayana walked to his side, but she kept looking back at Luke. She didn't want him to disappear without saying goodbye, so she stepped forward again. Only one small step, and she held out her hand. Luke stared at her hand for a moment. His heart tightened. He understood what the gesture meant. It meant thank you. It meant goodbye. It meant something bigger too, something neither of them could explain with words. He took her hand gently, giving it a soft, respectful squeeze. "You're safe now," he said in his warm voice. Ayana nodded. "You good?" she whispered. Luke felt emotion rise in his chest. He didn't know how to say everything he felt, how proud he was, how grateful, how deeply he cared in such a short time. So he only said the most important words. "I'm glad I found you." Ayana smiled a soft, meaningful smile that would stay with him forever. Her father touched her shoulder, and she stepped back slowly. The riders guided her toward the camp, where people were beginning to gather. Gasping with joy and calling her name, Luke watched until she disappeared behind the tents. He stood quietly, Dusty beside him, the stream humming in the background. His heart felt heavy and full at the same time, full of relief, full of quiet sorrow, full of something he knew he would carry forever. And when he finally turned away, the sky above him glowed with warm colors, as if the world itself understood the quiet, powerful bond he was leaving behind. Luke walked slowly along the quiet stream, putting more and more distance between himself and the Comanche camp. Each step felt light and heavy at the same time. Light because he had returned Ayanna safely. Heavy because he already missed her small voice, her gentle eyes, and the calm trust that had grown between them. Dusty walked beside him, swishing his tail softly. Luke kept one hand resting on the horse's neck, grounding himself. The sun was lowering in the sky, painting the grass in soft orange light. Ayanna's home was behind him now, hidden by the hill and trees, but the memory of her remained bright and close. Luke stopped for a moment and glanced back, even though he knew he couldn't see the camp anymore. He imagined her surrounded by family, wrapped in warm arms, telling everyone about her journey. He imagined her laughing again, eating warm food, brushing her hair, sleeping peacefully in a place she recognized. "I'm glad," Luke whispered to himself. "She deserves that," continued walking, but his mind remained full of thoughts. The journey had changed him in ways he did not expect. Before meeting Ayanna, he had believed he understood the world well enough. He thought he knew what was right and wrong. But traveling with her had opened new parts of his heart, parts that had been quiet for many years. He had learned patience, gentleness, careful awareness. He had learned how important trust could be between two people who barely shared a language but shared the same sky. He had learned how powerful kindness was, how it could connect strangers from different worlds. The sun dipped lower, and Luke found a comfortable spot near the water to rest for the night. He gathered a few dry sticks and made a small fire, the same way he did the night he met Ayanna. He placed his saddle on the ground and leaned back, staring at the warm flames. For a while, he sat quietly, thinking about everything that had happened. He thought about Ayanna sitting beside him the first night, wrapped in a blanket, trembling with fear but slowly calming in the warmth. Of the fire, he thought about the moment she placed her hand near his arm to comfort him when he blamed himself. He thought about her laughter when she splashed water on her face at the stream. He thought about her small hand reaching out to him during their goodbye. "Ayanna," he said softly, testing her name one more time in the quiet evening air. The fire cracked softly, almost as if answering him. Luke wasn't sure how long he sat there before he finally laid down to sleep. The sky above him was full of stars, bright, scattered, endless. He closed his eyes and let the peaceful sounds of the night wrap around him like a soft blanket. In the morning, he felt different, still thoughtful, still quiet, but stronger in some way. The journey had given him a deeper understanding of himself. He packed his things, patted Dusty's neck, and began riding back toward his ranch. As he traveled, he noticed things he hadn't noticed before. The way the grass swayed like waves, the way small birds darted from tree to tree, the scent of wildflowers carried by the wind. He felt more connected to the land, more aware of the world's beauty. He also felt more aware of the people who lived on it, not just settlers like him, but the native families, the children who played near their homes, the elders who told stories under the stars, and the young girls like Ayanna who gathered herbs near the river. He felt closer to all of them, even if he didn't share their history. For days he rode quietly, stopping at familiar points along the way. Sometimes he talked to Dusty, sometimes he spoke to the sky. Sometimes he simply walked and listened to the earth beneath his feet. One evening, as the sun was setting behind the hills, Luke reached his ranch. The familiar sight of the wooden fence, the farmhouse, and the open fields greeted him like old friends. He felt a mixture of comfort and nostalgia, but stepping inside, he realized something important. The ranch felt different now, not because anything had changed, but because he had changed. That night he sat at his small wooden table, thinking deeply. He remembered the fear he saw in Ayana's eyes when he first found her, and then the trust that slowly bloomed. He remembered the sting of guilt he carried, and how her gentle gesture had eased it. He realized something else. Something that had been forming in him since the start of their journey. He wanted to be better. He wanted to be the kind of man who always made others feel safe, the kind who listened, the kind who cared enough to understand people different from himself, the kind who brought peace instead of fear, the kind who saw every person, no matter where they came from, as someone with a story worth respecting. Over the next days and weeks, Luke began living differently. He spoke more gently to the young ranch hands who worked with him. He helped travelers on the road more often. He shared food with strangers passing through. He told stories of kindness and cooperation instead of stories filled with division. People noticed the change in him. "You seem different, Luke," one ranch hand said. Luke smiled softly. "I just learned a few things," he replied. But the truth was simpler. He had walked beside a brave girl who showed him a better way to be. Sometimes. Late in the evenings, Luke would sit outside and look toward the distant hills where Ayana's home lay. He wondered how she was doing. He wondered if she ever thought about him. He liked to believe she did, maybe when she heard the sound of a stream or saw wildflowers blooming near the water. He hoped she was happy, surrounded by love and laughter. He hoped she felt safe every night. He hoped she remembered that she was strong, not because of him, but because of who she had always been. One cool morning, months after their journey, Luke rode near the edge of the plains to check the fences. The wind was calm, carrying the scent of early summer grass. Dusty walked with an easy rhythm. Then, out of nowhere, Luke noticed something small, near a patch of wildflowers. It was a tiny woven charm, made of colorful threads and small beads. The kind the Komanche people made, the kind Ayana wore on her clothes. Luke picked it up gently and held it in his hand. A warm smile touched his face. "A sign," he whispered. Maybe Ayana had passed by. Maybe someone from her family had been nearby. Maybe it was simply a piece of the world reminding him of her. Either way, felt meaningful. Luke tied the charm to his saddle strap, where it hung softly, moving with the wind as Dusty walked. It became a reminder of the journey that changed him, a reminder of the quiet bond shared on the open plains, and a reminder that kindness could bridge even the widest distance between two worlds. He rode on with a peaceful heart, understanding now that some people enter our lives for a short time but leave a lasting mark, one that stays with us like a gentle echo long after the journey ends. And though Luke and Ayana lived in different worlds, their stories were connected forever, written across the land they had traveled together, carried in the wind, remembered in the quiet of each evening, and held softly in the heart of anyone who believed in compassion.